meeting.
Okay. Good afternoon, everybody. This is Vicki Massey. Thank you all for attending this webinar today. In the room with me are Joy Aldrich, Colleen Trogdon, and Rena Croucher. Jennifer Ross is also available. So I'm letting you know this because we really want this to be interactive. We want you to ask questions anytime during the webinar. We're going to talk about the new Elderly Rental Assistance Program today. And we did send out materials to you. If you'll take a look at your agenda, first of all, I want to give you a little bit of history about the ERA program. This is an existing program. It's been run by the Department of Revenue for the last, I don't know, maybe 20 years. Their program was very different than what ours is going to be. Their program was a one-time annual payment to the elderly person who was a renter, which was supposed to pay them back for the amount of rent that they had paid during the year that would have been passed on to them by the landlord to cover the landlord's property taxes. So it's kind of a property tax rebate program. And anybody who had ever applied for this once a year payment would be on the Department of Revenue's mailing list. Department of Revenue would mail out the filing form in January. The tenant would have to complete it, get it back in July, and then they got their checks in November. And that happened like clockwork for about 20 years. So come this January, when these folks did not get their forms for filing, we got tons of phone calls, and you may also have received some phone calls, I'm finding out. They counted on this check. Since it came in November, many of them used it for Christmas presents. They might have used it for a car repair or new tires or to pay a particular medical bill. Department of Revenue had a biennial budget of about $1.9 million. What we understand is that our biennial budget will be about $1.5 million, and the amount that will be available to you for program is about $1.25 million per biennium. So it's not a lot of money. You can figure that it's about 3 times what you receive in LRF funds every biennium. In 2014, the Department of Revenue mailed out 2,409 checks for an average payment of $359. So we're moving from that kind of a program to a more comprehensive rental assistance program. The legislature transferred the program to OHCS in 2015. Our program is scheduled to begin on July 1. We'll get our funding on July 1, and we'll get those funds allocated to you shortly after that. The legislature pretty much said, here you go, make your program, which was really very exciting because we don't often get the opportunity to just, create a program. So we enjoyed that. The legislative requirements that are in the bill there are 3. The program must serve persons 58 years or older. It must serve very low income, which is 50% AMI or less. And it must defray the cost of rental housing. So we developed a program design group. It was made up of 2 CAP executive directors, 2 CAP program managers, and 2 OHCS staff people. This is the group that created the design of the program, which was then reviewed by the Housing and Homeless Committee of CAPO. It was tweaked a little bit by them and then approved. It was presented to the OHCS executive team and approved by them. And then just a couple weeks ago, I presented it to the Housing Stability Council. And they were very excited about having this additional funding source. The design team had to really think about what they wanted this program to do. And they determined that they wanted it to be as flexible as possible. So it's modeled after the EHA program because that's one of our most flexible programs, except that it doesn't provide funding for shelter. That's the big difference. It will serve homeless, at risk of homeless, or unstably housed persons using the EHA definitions that are in the EHA manual. And the group decided that they really wanted it to be a more intensive and longer investment in the client's stability than the Department of Revenue's program was. So that's really where we started. I've sent out the, no, never mind, I'm going to do that later. If you will get your manual up that was sent out to you, I want to go through the manual just section by section, which sounds worse than it is because much of it is just based upon the EHA manual and you're already very familiar with it. I would like to start section 1, program summary. Before I do, are there any questions from anyone up to this point? Nothing on this side? No? Okay, you're all very quiet.
They can also unmute themselves if they want to talk.
Be sure to unmute yourself if you want to ask a question or make a comment. Okay, program summary. The ERA funds, if you look at the second sentence of that paragraph, ERA funds are available for the following program components: transitional housing, rapid rehousing, homelessness prevention, supportive in-home services, case management, program admin, and data collection. Client eligibility are the homeless definitions, 50% or below AMI, and at least one member of the household must be 58 years or older. The housing composition, again, is that one member of the household must be 58 years or older. What this paragraph says is that the head of the household or the spouse must be 58 years or older. We'll revise that so that it's consistent with the paragraph or the statement up in the client eligibility. So in the final manual, that will be consistent. Housing status are the homeless characteristics. Income. The second paragraph under income includes the current gross income of all adult household members. And so someone asked about children. Do you include children's income? And we determined that household income would include a disabled adult child's income, but would not include minor children's income. We have a question. Sorry I missed the earlier, but we automatically receive these funds once we fill out the ERA budget work plan? And if so, how much will each agency receive? Good question, Mandy, and that's a little bit later on our agenda. We'll talk about that after we go through the manual. Back to section D of the manual, citizenship and residency. There are no citizenship or residency requirements. We have at least one agency that has a policy that applicants must prove residency, Oregon residency, because they get people coming over from Idaho. And so that's fine. We're not intending to surpass their policy at all. The fact that there's no citizenship or residency requirement is really like the outside parameter, and if your agency happens to have policies that are different than that, that's fine. Next section is the assessment. All applicants must be assessed to determine eligibility for receipt of assistance. The staffing cost to complete the assessment and confirm eligibility is eligible, even if it's determined that the applicant is not eligible. Let me know if you have any questions about that. Eligibility documentation is exactly what you'll find in the state manual. Allowable program components and expenditures. ERA can be used in the following: supportive in-home services, transitional housing, homelessness prevention, rapid rehousing, case management and housing stabilization, and data collection. For supportive in-home services, the eligible items are listed there. I want you to note the sentence that is below number 5. It says in-home services are allowed only when in-home supportive service programs are not available in the subgrantee's service area. So this is not to take the place of services that might be available through other sources, but it's only to be used when there are no other sources. Under transitional housing, if you go down to the eligible services include monthly rent subsidy of gross rent in excess of tenant's portion. Tenant will pay 30% of adjusted monthly income, and the transitional housing rental assistance is not to exceed 24 months. Then you have the other components that we're used to, utilities, if also paying rental subsidy, relocation assistance, case management. The reason that we added the 2 requirements that rental assistance cannot exceed 24 months and that the tenant must pay 30% towards their rent. You'll find that all throughout the program, and we did this because as I said, there's not a lot of money with the ERA program. And in some cases, you will want to provide a long-term rental assistance for these clients. And instead of committing a lot of ERA funding, we really encourage you to find other longer-term rental assistance sources, such as home TBA or Section 8 or other funding And those longer-term programs have the requirement that the tenant will pay 30%. And some additional requirements that you'll see in here. So we did include some requirements that are not part of the EHA program. We did it because that really allows you to transition your client into these longer term programs without providing them with a hardship of having to move to a unit that, you know, that meets those parameters, or once they get stabilized, then all of a sudden they have to pay 30% of the rent. So that's the reason that those are folded into this program. We have a question. Just want to clarify that SSI, death benefits on behalf of a child, are not countable income for the ERA program. I do not have the slightest idea. Does anybody know the answer to that? It would be the same as counting the income for all the other programs, and if it follows the Section 8 guidelines, which is what? CFR 24, I'm trying to remember, Part 5.609, I think is what it is, or the Section 8 guidelines. So if you have questions like that, I am definitely not an expert on that. You can look it up in the CFR, or if anybody here knows the answer to that, speak up. Kate, I can do some research on that and get back to you later. Hmm? 24 part 5.609. Yeah. Oh, where were we? Homeless prevention, Section C. Same items as in the other state programs. I want you to note under item 8, the utility arrearage. We did add something there. It says use of program funds for utility-related costs is only allowable when client has been assessed for eligibility and provided access to subgrantee's energy assistance program. So if they have not received any assistance from the energy assistance side of your shop, we want you to see if they're eligible to receive assistance to help pay their utility arrearage out of energy assistance money before you would use ERA money for that. And then the second part of that is payment of utility arrearage assistance can only occur when there is documented evidence of a current utility bill in the participant's name. Utility arrears assistance must result in utilities being turned on at the new or existing permanent housing location. So just the fact that they've got some arrearage, some past due utility expenses, that is not eligible for the ERA funding. It's only eligible if they're that arrearage is going to cause them to lose their utilities, or they must pay it before they can get their utilities turned on. There's a note under that for rent arrearage. I think that that's the same as is in the EHA manual. Payment of arrears is restricted to a one-time payment for up to 6 months past due rent. Rapid rehousing is the same as EHA, except that it does have the requirement that tenant will pay 30% of their monthly income, and that rent subsidy will not exceed 24 months. has the same utility arrearage and rent arrearage parameters there. Case management, I don't think there's anything new. Well, yeah. The paragraph under item number 5, subgrantees are expected to link elderly program participants to other longer-term case management and support resources whenever feasible through other programs within the agency or through programs offered by local branches of state offices and or other community providers. Again, we're encouraging this because you don't have a lot of ERA money. And so we really emphasize that this is funding to stabilize folks. And then if they're going to need longer term services, partner, connect them with other resources. Data collection, nothing new there. Number G, ineligible activities and assistance. There are some ineligible activities. Rental assistance to a program participant who is already receiving rental subsidy through other public sources. And notice that it says rental assistance. So if they've got a Section 8 voucher but they can't get into housing because they have rent arrears that needs to be paid, you can pay the rent arrears with ERA. You just can't pay rental assistance if they are already receiving a rental subsidy. Number 2, payments made directly to program participants. You can't do that. You can't make payments of a mortgage or a land contract. You can't make payments to an assisted living facility or a care facility. And you can't pay the costs of discharge planning programs in a mainstream institution. We have any questions about any of this? Okay. Section number 4, determining the amount and duration of ERA subsidy. I know that many of your agencies have a program where you pool the funds together. You determine which funds are the best use for clients' particular issues. And some of you have short-term rental assistance only. Some have short-term and long-term. Some have sliding scale. And you've got your programs very well set. We don't want to make this program any different than what you already do with your other programs. So what we are showing in the manual are the outside parameters, the maximum services that you can provide. And you as an agency can set your own policies for this program that work in conjunction with the way that you manage your other programs. The only parameter there would be the 30% rent payment and the maximum of 24 months rental assistance. And we have a question. Do we use HMIS data collection? Yes, you do. Page 15 of the program manual states OPUS. Really? Page 15. 15. Use of OPUS. Well, isn't that interesting? We do still use OPUS for fiscal. So it is a fiscal data system, but definitely not a client tracking system. So thank you, Martha. We'll make that change. And there's another one. Is there a match requirement? No. This is a state program, and our state programs do not have match requirements. Any other questions? before we go on? Okay. On to rent reasonableness. This is another parameter that we put in there so that your client is not in a unit that's way above market rate, and you'd be unable to put them on a longer term program without moving them. We did not put in a requirement for fair market rent. So hopefully when you do the rent reasonableness test, you will keep that in mind of what you plan to do after you stabilize the client. If you plan to move them, or if you plan to move them to a longer term subsidy, then consider that when you do your rent reasonableness test. Calculating gross rent, you're going to have something in the file, in the client file, that shows that shows all the income, how you received at your gross income. Someone in the webinar yesterday asked if you get the same deductions that the home TBA program gets for like disabled or children, I think, dependents. There are no deductions, so it's straight income calculation. And then you're going to have to show your calculation to how you determined their rent portion, their 30%. You're welcome to use the App 3 portion, the portion of the App 3 that that goes through those things, part 2 through 4, and use that as your documentation in your file for this program, if you want to do that. You can also create your own form. Just as long as when Melody looks in the file, she'll find a documentation for how you arrived at your income and how you arrived at the 30% requirement. Next section is housing standards, occupancy standards. The second paragraph there, subgrantee may choose to use the occupancy guidelines set by the Housing Choice Voucher Program, which is what Home TBA uses and ESG to a point, but Home TBA definitely. Or you may develop your own standards. If you develop your own standards, subgrantee must have a written policy which outlines those standards and must use those standards consistently. And that policy must be available for Melody when she comes out to monitor. The next item, the habitability standards, we discussed this yesterday and found that it might be problematic. It will be problematic for Melody to monitor, and it may be problematic for the agencies to adhere to. I'm going to recommend that the habitability standards section be removed from the manual. And so, stand by on that, and I'll have further information later. Section 8, general program requirements. Under outreach, subgrantees are encouraged to determine the most vulnerable and underserved subpopulations in their service area and tailor their outreach efforts to reach those households, as well as households that are least likely to apply for assistance. The design team discussed target populations pretty extensively. We decided not to create target populations. We had some that we were looking at, but felt that those would not be target populations for all subgrantees across the state. We do encourage you to really look at your underserved subpopulations of elderly and see if there are ones that that really should rise to a preference. When we were doing research, we found that persons in the 58 to 64 year age bracket don't have very many options. They don't have their Social Security, they don't have Medicare yet. If they've lost a job, nobody's going to hire them. If they get hired, it's going to be a minimum wage job. They may have lost their home in the recession and don't have the funds to obtain housing. So this age group is a very vulnerable age group, and you may want to think about targeting or giving preference to them. We found that households where the head of household was a woman are about double the vulnerability of households that are headed by a man in this age group. It's even worse if it's an African American or an American Indian household. So, you know, do some analysis, look at your data, and as I keep saying, it's not a lot of money, so be selective on how you're going to use it. Release of information form, no changes there. Confidentiality, no changes. Service termination or denial of assistance, no changes. Grievance and appeals process, non-discrimination. Limited English proficiency, conflict of interest. Coordinated entry process, if you'll note the note under the I, homeless coordinated entry process. Participation is required to the extent that the coordinated entry system is designed to serve the populations eligible for ERA services. So if you have a coordinated entry system but it's only designed to work for families with children, then you don't have to use it when doing intake for the ERA program. It's only if your coordinated entry process covers your general population that it's required. Section 9, financial management. I don't think we have any changes to this until you get to what I have is page 17, which is section 10, item C, performance measures and follow-up contact. We have created a performance measure for the ERA program, and it's the bullet there. Increased housing stability as measured by the percentage of total program participants served who reside in permanent housing at the time of exit from the program. This is a rental assistance program, and so that is the performance measure. We did not assign any kind of a measurement. There's no percentage there. What we want is some reporting history so that we know what is a reasonable performance measurement, and then we will add a percentage to that. So you will be receiving quarterly reports and a year-end report for the ERA program, and we will be asking that for you to report on that performance measure. And I think we're good until we get to section 12, which is monitoring. Melody will start monitoring for this program in 2018. And she will monitor for the period of time July 1 of 17, which is the start date for the program, through June 30 of 18. So just to let you know that that's when monitoring will begin. And I think that's it for the program manual. Any questions, comments? We have a question. Can these funds be used as match for case management for our housing programs that meet this program criteria? I would think so. There's state funds. They come out of the state general fund, just like EHA and SHAP and LRF. So if state funds are an eligible match for your other program, then I believe that you would be able to use the ERA as match. Any other questions? Okay, you guys are so quiet. Okay, I'm moving on to the second portion of our webinar, which is the MGA portion. I sent out the program element for the Elderly Rental Assistance Program. I'm not going to go over it. I just want to remind you that this is the attachment to the MGA. The ERA program is a master grant agreement program. So this is your guideline for and the attachment to the master grant agreement. And then I would like you to pull out the funding document that you see on the screen. These are your estimated allocations. And I underline the word estimate. We have recommended this formula. It's been discussed by CAPO. They haven't signed off on it. Our executive team has not signed off on it. So we're assuming that this will be the formula, but it's not a guarantee. But it will be very close to these numbers. So when you complete your work plan and your budget for submission for the MGA, please use these numbers. And this allocation is biennial, and your budgets are annual. So you want to make sure that you only use half of your allocation when you're developing your budget. Any questions on that? Okay. Next document I'd like to look at is the this one, the Elderly Rental Assistance Review Criteria. These are the criteria that we will review your work plan application against. It's pretty simple and straightforward. The first criteria is for required documentation. We have one item that we want you to, one required document that we want you to submit, and that is the list of service point projects that identifies at least one project for ERA. So I know that at this time you don't have any projects for ERA, but we want you to be able to tell us what you're going to do with those ERA funds. So establish at least one project following the naming convention. Second item is identification. If you have any subrecipients that will be using the ERA program, those are the criteria that we review against. And then the main section is for the ERA program. This work plan is set up just the same way as all the other work plans. So it lists your service components. We make sure that what you show in your service components matches what you show in your budget. That the service components that you say you will have households served in matches up with the rest of your program. The target population, we're not requiring one, but if you choose to have a target population, we want you to tell us what that is and why you determined that. And we have a question. Can we make a new project in Service Point named ERA if we plan to use it as a standalone program? Rena, can you respond to that?
Yes, they. Sorry. Yes, they should be able to. You can make a standalone one.
Okay.
Just like ESG and any of the other ones, you know, EHA.
Okay.
Yeah.
So yes, you can.
I'm understanding what they mean by standalone.
Okay. All right. Okay, back to the ERA components. Item number 4 there, marketing plan. This is a requirement. We want you to develop a marketing plan that will describe how you will reach the elderly persons who are not likely or able to apply on their own. Number 5 is the program limits. This gives you an opportunity to tell us how your program is going to differ than the maximum parameters that the program has, how you'll use it with your other programs, if you only provide short-term rental subsidy, if you don't provide any rental subsidy and you only use it for deposit assistance or move-in. It's your opportunity to tell us how you are modeling this program to fit in with your other programs. And then the budget, we look to make sure your admin doesn't exceed 10%. Your budget total exceeds what's on the allocation sheet, and that you have subrecipient budgets included, and that the line items on your budget match the service components that you've said you're going to serve. Then you have a packet that is the work plan and budget piece. Yeah, we'll go to required documents. As you can see, there's only one. That's the Service Point project name or names. Agency ID, there's no changes there. Subrecipients, there's no changes there. Signature page, and then onto the ERA program page. Here's the service components set up exactly the same way as your other work plan programs are. Item number 3 is what target population will be served. If you're not going to focus on any target population, you can just say none. Or you can say our policy is to only serve people that we take off the Section 8 waiting list, or you know, whatever. Number 4 is your marketing plan. That's a requirement. Number 5 is your opportunity to tell us how you're going to model your program. And then on to the budget, which is set up the same way as the other budgets is, but we have one change that we will make. If you go to the bottom of the subgrantee page, yeah, right there, or the subrecipient page, the program delivery subtotal of all subrecipients. We will be changing that because if you'll notice, those line items don't match up with the section right above it, which is the program delivery for the subgrantee. And they need to be the same. So we'll be revising that bottom section, and we will send you out a new budget. Questions? No questions. Okay. I really welcome your questions because it helps us sort out things that may not, be a line up with this program. If things don't look right to you, they're often not. So I really, ask your questions. The last thing on the agenda is the messaging to the public. As stated, the Department of Revenue in 2014 mailed out over 2,000 checks to people who filed for this program. We're estimating that the number of households that will be served with our ERA program for the biennium will be 300 to 500 households. So you've got 2,000 checks per year versus maybe 500 households per biennium. It's a big difference. And of all of the elderly people who called me wondering where their form was, and that was quite a few, when I told them that the new program was going to help folks who were homeless or at risk of losing their housing, they were all quite happy that it was the funding would be used for that. And when I said, now this program doesn't start till July 1, but if you currently need rental assistance or are having food issues or energy issues or anything like that, I can give you the name of your community action agency, or you can call 211. And every person said, oh no, I can pay my rent. I don't have any problems. I already get my energy assistance payment. None of them asked for assistance. And so what I think is that the population that took advantage of Department of Revenue's program is not going to be the population that needs the new ERA services. The Department of Revenue has sent out, I think, 3 or 4 notices to their mailing list, everybody on their mailing list to date. But based upon the number of phone calls that I received and that their call center received, and that we had to set up a 1-800 number finally to handle, the message really hasn't gotten through that the Department of Revenue's program is no more. The Department of Revenue will send out one more notice in May. It'll be a letter, and it will include a flyer that lists all of the community action agencies and their contact numbers. And if you haven't been receiving phone calls yet, I am quite sure that when they get that letter, you'll get a phone call, and they will want to be signed up. They'll want to enroll in the ERA program. Elderly people can be quite vocal when they realize that a benefit that they've had for many years is being taken away from them. And so we want to make sure that our messaging about this transition of the program is consistent and tactful. And so we're suggesting two things. One is that with the help of some of you, we will develop some messaging communications for your agencies to use when you get phone calls. And that also agencies will have a brochure, pamphlet, flyer that they can mail out to callers who are not familiar with what services your agencies can provide. Hoping that this that piece of customer service will have some value for them. So we're going to have a small committee to develop these messaging communications. There's a couple people from yesterday who volunteered to be in the group, and so I'm wondering if any of you want to be. Kelly asks the question, many of the households that use the 90R program, which is the Department of Revenue's program, were disabled as well, illiterate, etc. Communication may not be clear, as we are getting many calls asking when the 90R appointments are going to occur. Could a public service announcement be developed, and can we get the 1-800 number? You bet. So yes, that's what I'm asking for, is people to help me develop the public service announcement. That's a great name for it. And it's our department's 1-800 number, and I don't think I have that off the top of my head. And I can send it out to everybody. Or if you happen to have, I don't know, some letterhead from us or something that has our 1-800 number, when they call in, it goes through a number of options and they can push number, I think it's number 9. And then they get a message about what's happened with the Elderly Rental Assistance Program. And then and they have the option then to hit 0 after they hear that message to talk to a live person. So I'll make sure everybody receives that number. And Kelly, I'd be happy to have you on the committee. That'd be great. Anybody else want to give some time to developing this communication? You can certainly email me or email Rosaria and let us know if you would like to join us. And if you have any questions that you didn't think to ask about the program in general or anything about the program, feel free to email Rosaria or me. I am done with this presentation. Any questions or comments before we all sign off?
I have a question. This is Denise at Capco.
Hi.
The only question that I have is, when's the due date? When is this due? So that we can get the rest of this last piece for the work plan done.
The work plan? Thank you. Good question. Thank you. Just as soon as you can get it into me.
Okay.
The due date would be the same. I think there is a due date for your other work plan pieces. We'd like to get it as soon as possible because we would like to just be able to fold it in with the rest of your work plan documents.
Okay.
Yeah. Anything else? Okay. I thank everybody for taking the time to attend. If you do come up with questions, just email us. And we'll talk to you later. Thank you.